Hi, welcome to this week's CareerIgnite live chat session. Today we're talking about gap years and taking a gap year. So in case you notice, your phone is muted and also the video is turned off, just so that way we can kind of keep things orderly. But we're really excited to hear your questions and what you want to know about gap year experiences. So how it's going to work is you'll put your questions in the chat. We'll read the questions and try to answer them. And we'll introduce ourselves, the host will introduce ourselves, and then we'll get started. So my name is Missy Frazen. I work in Career Services as an Assistant Director for Career Development. And then I'll have my co-host introduce herself as well.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Tan Harrison, and I'm the Associate Director for Career Development.
So again, how it's going to work is if you have questions about gap years, if you could just drop them in the chat, we'll read your questions and answer them and give you lots of information and resources about gap years and why people take them and all that good stuff. You also can send a message directly to one of the hosts if you have a particular question. But I think the most important question for us to talk about is why people take gap year experiences at all. So Tan, can I throw that question to you? What would you say about that?
That is a great question. So, why people take a gap year?
Mm-hmm.
It could be for different reasons. I know for me, I took a gap year before it was even called a gap year, and I just needed that time to try and figure out what was the next steps for me in terms of my career path and what I wanted to do. And also to actually earn some additional money because graduating from school and I had the loans were kicking in a matter of a few months. And I needed something to help balance me out as I transitioned. And keep in mind also when I graduated in the middle of a recession. So that was a challenge. So it was for me trying to figure out what the next steps was. But at the same time, earn some money to help pay for my expenses now that I graduated from school.
And I think it's so interesting that you took a gap year, but like you said before, it was really called that, but I took a gap year too. And so I took a gap year, and actually two, but not, I did one and then I really liked it, so I did it again. But I think I wasn't sure what career I wanted to pursue. I really wanted to volunteer and give back, so I did AmeriCorps for a year. And so people have different motivations for taking a gap year, and it's just really important to define your goals. Like, what is it that you're trying to get out of that gap year? Tan mentioned saving money. I wanted to do some volunteer work and explore some different career paths. Sometimes people are trying to apply to graduate school, and so they want to use that year to take different tests like the GRE or things like that, or the MCAT. So everyone's different, and sometimes you can combine what you're trying to do as well.
Absolutely. We have a question from Alberto, and he said, at what ages did we take our gap years? Oh my goodness. Let me do my math.
I know, Alberto, you're bringing us right back. It's hard.
I think I was in it's like 25, 26, because I had took an extra year out in my undergrad because I wanted to get some work experience. So I took what is called a co-op, which was like an extended internship. And that resulted in me graduating at a later time. So yeah, I was around 25, 26 when I took my gap year.
So if you're just joining us, it looks like we have some more people on our live chat. Today's live chat is about taking gap year experiences. I'm Missy Frazen. I work in Career Services. We have Tan Harrison, who also works in Career Services. And so Alberto has asked this question about how old we were. We both just said that we both took gap years, but for different reasons. So it sounds like Tan was about like mid-20s, and I think I was 22. And for me, like, I had planned to take a gap year. Then my senior year of college, I was a little confused about what I wanted to do after I graduated. I heard about AmeriCorps, so that was my plan. I know sometimes people take a gap year, it's kind of not their plan, but that was my plan from the beginning. But I think, people sometimes even take a gap year after high school, sometimes before they go to college. So the most important thing is that it's intentional and that you're really trying to figure out what your goals are for taking a gap year so that you can have the best experience possible. So thank you for that question. I think that's a good one. I think another question we get asked a lot from students is, what do employers think about gap year experiences, right? Or what do graduate schools think about gap year experiences? And I think they think similar things that we just talked about. They want to see intentionality. They want to see that are you trying to get out of that gap year experience? What did you learn? What skills did you gain? And some graduate schools even award like extra scholarships if somebody does like a service program like AmeriCorps or like the Peace Corps. But they want to see that it's connected to what you want to do in the future, not that you are like hanging out on your parents' couch, you know, for 3 months. And it's okay to be confused. It's okay. Like I said, when I graduated from college, I wasn't really sure. I was thinking about teaching. I was thinking about like youth development, and I wasn't sure. So it's okay to be confused, but it's important to try to figure out what you want to get out of that experience so that when employers ask about that in an interview, or you're putting it on your resume, or you're talking about a personal statement, you have a lot of things to say versus just kind of not really knowing. Is there anything you want to add about that, Tan?
No, I totally agree with everything that you said. It makes perfect sense.
Okay, great. Because I do get that question. I know sometimes students feel like it's like not legit or something, you know, or employers feel like you were just messing around. And I think as long as you can help them understand that you weren't just messing around, that you were volunteering at a hospital, or like Tan said, maybe you're working and making some money, that you can explain to them what you're doing and why that is connected and how that's connected to what you want to do. I think employers can actually be excited about somebody taking a gap year, and potentially the same for graduate schools as well.
I agree, and to add on to that, you have to think about how that looks on your resume. If you have a year where you have nothing, no of anything being done, then that could raise a question in the interview. It's like, oh, well, we see a gap for this particular time period. What were you doing at the particular time? But if you fill that on your resume with volunteer work or work experience or research, that works in your favor from an employer perspective. So it's more of a benefit. And I know, Missy, you mentioned, you know, spending a year sitting on the couch. Yeah, I don't know anyone who did that, but I don't think that would look good. But it'll be beneficial if you think about how to make that year the best way possible, whether it is actually going to work and doing, because even when you're working, you're building up skill sets. That employers seek, and that works in your favor. So it looks like someone is asking a question. So Paul asks, what else can you, outside of working, volunteering or research, or retaking classes? So I'm assuming you're saying, what else can you do outside of working, volunteer, research, or retaking classes? And Missy, did you want to answer that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it depends on what your goals are. Like, what are you trying to get out of that gap year experience? Are you trying to make money? Are you trying to gain career experience? Are you trying to, like, maybe you want to go in the health professions? I know a lot of the different graduate health programs like med school, physicians, assistants, etc. They require clinical hours and like hours in a healthcare setting. So it's important for you to figure out, like, there's no one right way to do a gap year. The only wrong way to do a gap year, I think, is to not be planful and to just kind of just do whatever. But it depends on what your goals are. And then you can decide, like, for some people, like working in retail, for some people makes so much sense. It's making money, it's developing those transferable skills like customer service, leadership, communication. It depends on you and what it is you want to do. But I mean, I've seen people do research. I've seen people teach abroad, do some traveling abroad. I've seen people volunteer. I've seen people substitute teach, or trying to decide if they maybe want to be a teacher, but they haven't explored education a lot. So I think I've seen all different things, but it depends on you and what your goals are for that experience. And I think on that note, just as a reminder, so Tan and I both work in career services, and we offer virtual career advising appointments. So if you're trying to define your goals, or you're not sure where to start, you absolutely can make an appointment with our office. And call our phone number, and we'll give you that information at the end of the chat. We can also drop it in the chat. We're happy to make an appointment with you and talk to you more about your particular goals and helping you figure out what makes the most sense for you personally. That's a great question, though. Thank you for asking that question, for sure.
Great question. And please, you know, if you have any questions or anything that comes to mind, feel free to add your question to the chat so we'll be happy to respond to that.
Absolutely.
Oh, we have another question. It says, what occupation or grad school acceptance were you working towards when you took your gap years?
I can get started. Well, like I said before, I honestly wasn't sure. I'd done a lot of volunteer work in college, and I really enjoyed that. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in communication, and I thought I was going to do marketing and public relations. I actually did a bunch of internships in college around marketing and public relations, but then I started getting more interested in teaching and working with youth. So the goal for me of the gap year was, I wanted to do some volunteer work. That was something that was important to me. And I wanted to do something working with kids to try to sort of figure that out. So I spent like 2 months in a middle school classroom tutoring kids. I helped run a summer camp. The program that I did is a traveling team-based program, and your projects change every couple of months. And I knew that a lot of them involved working with children. So that was, for me, that was a big motivation. But I wasn't sure yet, you know, but I knew that I would learn teamwork skills and communication skills. It's very much a team-based program. So I knew that I would come out with those skills as well. But I wasn't sure exactly what it is I wanted to do for grad school. That's a great question. Tam, what about for you?
Wow. Yes. So this is one of those, really, you did that? So I attended, my undergrad was a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from Illinois Institute of Technology. And I decided in my last year, actually, as I was getting close to graduation, that I did not want to pursue a chemical engineering career path. So I worked at, during my last year in school, I worked part-time at a culinary school as a receptionist. And when I decided to take the break before I decided to go to the next step of my career, I was able to get a full-time job at that cooking school, and that allowed me time to do my applications for the program I got admitted into, which was the Western Illinois University College Student Personnel Master's Program. So that worked out, and then I was able to save some money because I need to make arrangements to move, because, you know, that Western is located down in Macomb.
And I think one thing, Tan's reminding me, one thing for me, like I wasn't sure what graduate program I wanted to do, but after I did AmeriCorps, I ended up interning at Big Brothers and Big Sisters in Chicago. I ran some mentoring programs for them. And I'm certain that I got that particular internship, which led to a full-time position, which ended up leading to my kind of dream job, my other full-time position. I got all of those positions because I had done AmeriCorps, and I had so much experience working with youth and running mentoring programs. As an AmeriCorps member, that was something that was attractive to Big Brothers and Big Sisters when they took me on originally as a volunteer, or like as a volunteer intern. And so I think that could happen, that your AmeriCorps experience or teaching abroad, or even like what Tan talked about, any of those things that help you lead to your next path, even though sometimes it can be confusing how that's going to happen.
I agree, and I think I think our stories kind of give a different perspective from different routes, and how we end up at the same point at this time. It shows that, you know, no one path is going to be direct, and also is that, you know, if you are intentional in how you plan everything, things can be working more in your favor when you do so. We have another question from Paul, and it says, do you know any students who have made a new business during the gap year?
You know what, that is such an interesting question. I don't think I do off the top of my head, but I also think that there's actually a lot of great resources if you're thinking about potentially opening up a business. Like, I don't know if people have heard of 1871, but that's kind of a hub in the city for startups. So that might be an interesting place to just contact, and you could do some informational interviews, meet with folks who started up different organizations. You could ask them how they got started. But I haven't heard of that specifically, but that could be a great project. If you're thinking about exploring making a business and how that would work, that could be something to get started with and sort of see how that goes.
I agree. I don't, off the top of my head, I don't recall working directly with a student who started, but I do recall one of the career advisors that I've worked with did have a student who came in, and they were interested in starting their own nonprofit organization during that gap year. So it is possible to do it. It's just a matter of you doing the research and making sure you're able to prepare yourself for that to start that off, because that could take up a lot of time and effort. And then to try and keep that going while you're going to pursue your next steps in your career, you want to make sure you plan that out to the best of your ability. So it is possible. And I would say just make sure you utilize the resources that are available to you.
Yeah, and I think also to Tan's point, like you may end up like maybe working somewhere part-time to make money, just to have resources if you have to pay your rent and that type of stuff. But then in your other time, potentially really work on developing that business. I know depending on the student, but I know like I think there's like the Women's Development Resource Center. Like there are different resource centers in the city. The Small Business Development Center like may have a resource center as well. So if you're looking to start a business, there's actually a lot of good resources to look at depending on you and also how you identify.
Exactly. I totally agree. There are plenty of resources throughout the city that help in promoting small businesses. And even if you're interested in starting in more of the entrepreneur route in terms of your career path, Paul, I would suggest, if you haven't done so already, is to connect with some entrepreneurs and see if they could take you on as an intern. I think that would be a great 1-year internship. If you're interested in going the entrepreneur route, is to shadow and work with an entrepreneur and see how it goes from there.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. In 1871, definitely, it's at the Merchandise Mart. I'm sure they're working remotely, just like we're all working remotely right now, but there's tons of entrepreneurs at 1871, and they usually have different meetings and webinars as well. So you might be able to try to hop on and learn from some entrepreneurs about kind of what they're doing and how they got started, for sure.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
I'm trying to think about some other questions that students will ask us. Sometimes I feel like students will ask us like, maybe like, what are, some misconceptions like about gap year experiences? And I think I know sometimes I talk to students about is that a gap year experience like you're just like kind of relaxing. And maybe you are. It depends on what you're doing. But I know when I was in AmeriCorps, I was busy. I was working 40, 50 hours a week, and we also built houses, we built trails. So it was enjoyable and I had a really impactful experience, but it was not like a vacation. I was busy, I was doing a lot of different things. We were moving around to different projects. So it's not necessarily like a vacation, but it can also be like kind of a brain break sometimes for people as you reflect on what it is you want to do. I know for me, it solidified that I did want to work with students. That was helpful, but it's not necessarily like a vacation. You may actually be pretty busy during your gap year, but you may not be going to classes unless that's part of your plan for your gap year experience.
Yes, I totally agree. Because like I said, I worked. I just went and worked and took a full-time job. And one of the things that I truly appreciated is I had no exams. It was beautiful to take a break from not taking exams, not writing any papers, even though I was still writing because I had to write personal statements and things like that. But the gap year does give you that time to have a mental break. But it's not to say that you shouldn't be building your skills while you're doing that gap year. So for example, if you're want to take a gap year before you go into IT or social media, then reading up on the latest tools that are being used in your area of interest during that gap year, you can do it at your leisure, at your own pace. So there are some benefits in terms of building additional skills while you're taking that gap year. And that's one of the things I was appreciative of because it allowed me some time to do things at my pace.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I mentioned this before, but when I went on interviews after I'd done AmeriCorps, I literally had answers to so many interview questions about, tell us about a time that you had a conflict with a group that you worked with, or tell us about a time that a project didn't go as well as you wanted it to go. All of the projects that I worked with, we had conflicts, like sometimes we were missing supplies. There was a lot of problem solving that I had to do in order to finish up our different projects. So I had so many things to say in interviews. I almost think interviewers, like I talked about a lot, like I had a lot to say. And so I think your gap year experience can also give you a lot of relevant examples to talk to employers about as far as your communication skills, your problem solving skills, your leadership skills. And so again, it's not like necessarily like a vacation. You're potentially learning and growing a lot from those experiences.
I agree. And we got a great question from Alberto, and he's asking, how did you deal with family or friends not understanding what you're doing?
Yeah, that is a great question because that was really something that was hard for me, especially about my family. Like I mentioned before, I had done some marketing internships and public relations internships. I probably could have pretty easily gotten a full-time position in one of those fields, but I wanted to try something else and I wanted to think about working with kids and doing volunteer work, and people in my family were not excited, let's say, about my interest in doing something different. And so I think you have to, like I talked to mentors in my life, I talked to some advisors that I had in college, and Just got some feedback from them. And I think, you know, as you're graduating from college, or even if you're taking a year off from college, like, you're becoming an adult. And so I just kind of kept calmly explaining to my family about why I thought this is a good fit for me, what I was going to get out of it. And, you know, it was different. I'm sure when I was 16 or 18, I wouldn't have been able to do something that my family didn't approve of. But as you're getting a little bit older, it's okay to choose something that you think is a good fit for you, even if your family may or may not agree. You can do it in a respectful way. I also gave a lot of evidence. AmeriCorps has tons of statistics on their website about the positive experiences for members and communities, and so I used some of that to kind of build my case. But I think it was probably the first time in my life that I made a really big decision that my family was not necessarily on board with.
Got it. I think for me, this is having a mental flashback because I'm from a large family, so I'm the youngest of 10. So when I shared with my parents, because those were the first people that I went to tell them that I am going to take a year off and before I start the next step in terms of my career. And my mom got on the phone and she called all the other 9 siblings, and all of the siblings they came in over like a 3-week period. I remember this as if it was yesterday, and they all came and lectured me and asked me. It was like I was having a grilling, and I had to explain to them what my plans were and what was my intentions, and let them know that, you know, I appreciate you telling me that this may not be the best decision for me, but I would appreciate your support and letting me know and supporting me in terms of me making my decision that I think this is the best for me. And it's a year. You know, I was in my mid-20s. It was a 1-year time period. I didn't think it would be that much of an issue. And when I explained to them what my plans were after that year in detail, because, you know, they had to tell them in detail, then they got it. It's like, okay, I'm not too crazy about this, especially the fact that when you're making a decision to not go into engineering, but we support you in your decision. And what also helped is that when you had the plan, when I had the plan, and I told them, I said, yeah, I just accepted a full-time job to work at the culinary school where I've been working with. And it's like, oh, okay. Then get the year, save up some money, and then take it to the next step. And once I explained the plan, they fell in place and said, we support you in your decision. We don't think it's the best. We thought you should go into engineering, but we support you in your decision in terms of moving forward. So if you have, like I said, if you plan everything out and explain to them what the plan is, and they will understand it, and then you have proof to say it's in progress, then they can support you in a better way, as opposed to not supporting you at all. But, you know, every family is different. But I think if you explain the plan and that tell them that it's already in action, then a lot of times they'll probably say, we support you in your decision.
It's interesting. So Tan and I work together pretty closely, and we have never discussed this, kind of what our family's reactions were. It's funny because they kind of had similar reactions. And I guess one thing that I've never asked you is, like, are you glad you took that gap year? Like, do you regret it? Do you wish you had just started working in like kind of engineering right away?
Oh, well, you know, I have no regrets, because in the end, it got me where I wanted to be in terms of a career change. Because keep in mind that I had made the decision to not go into engineering at all. And when they realized that raised more questions. But as I explained to them why I decided not to go into engineering, how I felt that it was not really something I had a passion for, then they started saying, okay, but please understand, you're not going to get paid. And it's like, well, I'll get paid.
Right.
I'll get paid in my own way, on my own, you know, new career path.
Right.
And it's all, and I usually tell people, you know, you can get a well-paying job and hate what you do in terms of your career. But in the end, it's all about where you feel that you will have that sense of fulfillment. And I decided that it was not going to be a good fit for me. And, you know, there are plenty of people who are working in different fields who love what they do, and there are great engineers who love what they do, and they're doing it very well. But it's all about what you have a passion for, is what I usually tell people to keep in mind. So no regrets, none whatsoever.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't either, actually. And again, my family, like, I think similar to Tan's family to some extent, was just not necessarily jazzed about my plans. But again, like, it definitely led me to two of my kind of really impressive, like, full-time positions that I really don't think I would have gotten without them. So it can be hard to do something that originally your family is like not super crazy about. And I think laying out your plan and explaining your rationale is important. The other thing too, I remember my mom was like, "Oh, like you're not gonna have health insurance, but don't worry, AmeriCorps has health insurance." And I like found the document, I sent it to her, I showed it to her, and so, and I also was like, "Look, in grad school, sometimes even match the education award that I'm gonna get." So I think sometimes you really have to give them that evidence and show them that your plan is legit, and you're not making it up. So thank you for sharing, Tan. That's helpful.
No problem. We have two more questions, which is great. And thank you all for asking these great questions. Kayla is asked a question of when taking a gap year, were you nervous about losing your stride with being out of school for a year and planning on returning in the future? That is a fantastic question. I don't think I was nervous about losing my stride with being out of school for a year. I think I was more excited about the fact that I was not going to be in school for a year than anything. And I think that it all kicked back in once I started taking classes for my master's. So the 1 year didn't really throw me off. But I will say, and I'll share this as an extension because I did go back to school years later and went into a doctoral program. And when I started my doctoral program, I was out of school for about, oh my goodness, I think it had to be at least 12 years. Now that was a challenge, but I don't think the gap year was not. No, it was fine.
And I think that's such a great question. I'm glad that Kayla asked that because I get that question from students a lot. Like, yeah, like my family says that if I take a year off or I do a gap year, I'm never going to go back to graduate school. And I've never read a study. I think I've never heard any data on that. I personally think it's kind of like an urban legend. They're like, oh, you're never going back. I think sometimes you actually are more focused when you take a year or two off and then go back to graduate school, because hopefully in that time you're exploring your different career options, you're thinking about what you want to do, so you're more focused because you've chosen something that seems like a good fit versus just going to graduate school right away because you don't know what else to do. So I've never seen any evidence that if you take a year off or 2 years off that you're less likely to go back, or that when you go back you're going to struggle. I think sometimes you're more focused because having a brain break, like Tan's talked about, not having tests, that type of stuff, it can be good for us. Like, you've been in school potentially for a really long time. It's okay to take a little bit of a break, especially if you're not sure what you want to do. Going to graduate school is an expensive proposition. It's in terms of your time and also in terms of money. You want to be sure that that graduate degree is a good fit for you versus just going because you don't know what else to do.
That is so true. And when you pick your graduate program, the ideal situation is that you're pursuing a major or a career path that you truly have an interest for. And one of the key differences between graduate school versus undergrad is that with the undergrad, you have to take those other classes, and people are saying, well, why do I have to take humanities? Or why do I have to take, communications when I'm another major? Or, some students say, well, why do I have to take physics when I'm not even going to pursue physics? But usually in a master's program, those are focused towards the major. And if you don't have an interest in that particular major, then yes, it could end up being a struggle in terms of trying to tie in what you're learning with what you see yourself doing with that particular degree. Right. So you have to keep that in mind when you're moving forward. So it actually helps when you have an interest in the master's that you're pursuing the subject area. When you have an interest, you're more invested right. as a student. And that's where your interest can peak, and you're like, oh my goodness, this is awesome. This is a different experience versus the undergrad. And the challenge is going to be there because it's a higher level of learning. But because of that core piece is the interest that helped make a difference.
Absolutely. So I know we've had some folks join us in the last couple minutes. So if you're just joining us, welcome to our weekly live chat. Today's topic is about gap year experiences. My name is Missy. I work in career services. We have Tan, who also works in career services, so we're co-facilitating. If you have a question, please drop it in the chat, and we're reading them aloud and trying to answer them.
Yes,
so just wanted to just welcome everybody if you're new.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that, but we do have another question. Paul asks, do you have any advice on getting into a good routine while on a gap year?
That is a really great question. It's interesting. I kind of feel like what's going on now with sort of a lot of us working remotely from home, in some ways is like a weirdo practice run, potentially, for like thinking about a routine and getting into a routine. I know one thing for me that I've noticed now is like trying to get up at the same time, even if I don't have a student appointment, you know, at 9 a.m. or 8:30, like trying to start my day at the same time. So I think definitely coming up with a routine that works for you is important. And I think a while ago, we talked about this idea of connecting with people who are maybe doing what you want to do. So a student had asked about starting a business. We talked about connecting with entrepreneurs. But I think you also can be connecting with professionals in careers that you're interested in during your gap year as well. So maybe once a week or, you know, every other week trying to do an informational interview. So meeting with somebody who's doing what you want to do, or maybe they work somewhere that you want to work, and asking them questions about how they got to that part of their life. It's about usually like 25 minutes. It's pretty short. That's something that you can incorporate sort of as a routine. And also like surrounding yourself with people that are supportive of you. It could be your family, be your friends, it could be mentors, professors, advisors. You can keep in touch with people on campus, even if you've graduated and moved on. So thinking about who you want to be in touch with during that gap year, I think is part of your routine to help keep you motivated and help keep you connected with your network. What do you think, Tan?
I totally agree. And thinking about my break, because it's so weird, because you know, like I said before, it was called a gap year. I just took a year off. He's like, what's Tan doing? She's taking a year off. Leave her alone. So if it's any advice that I would say in regards to Paul's question about getting a routine, I'm going to be honest with you. Those first 1 or 2 months after graduating, and I was just working. That's all I did. I just worked, because I didn't want to think about anything at that time, because I was just tired. For me, I was at a complete burnout when I graduated, and I just needed time to just get through the burnout. And that's something I would really recommend anybody who experienced a burnout, is to make time for yourself. So I gave myself that 1 or 2 month time period. But during that 1 or 2 month time period, I made sure that I started thinking about how this is going to look over the next, 8, 9, 10 months. And I started writing down what the ultimate goal is. So my ultimate goal was to start a master's program. And I said, well, what does that look like? What does that entail? So I started scheduling out my my plans each week. And it's like, okay, I know I have to work from 9 to 4:30 or 9 to 5. And knowing me, I know that when I get home, I'm not going to be in the mood to be doing any research. So I said, okay, I'm going to make sure on the weekends I would plan out at least about 3 or 4 hours on Saturday, and I was going to do my research. So I used that time and planned out my schedule and went ahead and did the research. And it's like, okay, I need to schedule times for site visits, so I need time to also start working on updating my resume and getting my personal statement. So I started planning my time out each week. Once I was done with the break, I was like, okay, break time is over. Now I need to start working on my schedule. And that kind of fell in place for me. So for in terms of routine, I had to get a schedule in place in order to understand and to keep in mind the ultimate goal in mind as well. So I had that on my wall, and it's like grad school, literally get into grad school and then plan it from there.
I think that's great advice. I think especially if you've been in school again for a long time, high school and college, like you're so used to this very structured routine, which you may or may not love, but you're used to it. And so after you graduate from college, your schedule generally is just different. and like you get to make it, which I think sometimes can be a little bit overwhelming and sometimes a little scary, but getting into a routine that works for you is going to help you kind of make sense of that time so that you're making good use of it. And I think Tan's kind of like setting weekly goals, and like it sounds like over the weekend she was doing all this research. That's a great way to get started.
But I made time for cartoons too.
Thank goodness. What would you do without Tom and Jerry?
I know, right? Now it's the amazing world of Gumball.
Oh no, don't get her started. Oh boy. Okay.
Always, if there's anything I can advise you, always go back and maintain the pieces of your childhood. That'll keep you young. So if any advice you remember that, just remember keep that in mind. We do have another, and these are great questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys.
And we do have another one. Kayla is asking, do you have any advice about volunteering with Peace Corps? And I think, Misty, you'll probably be better to answer that question.
Yeah. Sure, I would love to talk about it. So Peace Corps is a really great experience. If you haven't heard about it, it's a 2-year commitment. You're doing work not in the United States, usually in a developing country. And so I think my biggest piece of advice, and I'll drop it in the chat before we're done, is there's actually a Peace Corps recruiter that works a lot with UIC. Her name is Jill Conway. She's very helpful, very responsive. My guess is just like us, she's working from home, but I'll drop her email address in. She's a great person for you to connect with and just express your interest. You can talk, ask her questions. I think the first thing to do is to go on the Peace Corps website and just do some research. So you can try to figure out, is there a certain place you want to go in the world? Although I will tell you, they usually want people to be pretty flexible about where you want to go, but also what do you want to do there? Like, do you want to teach English? They have economic development Peace Corps positions. They have more like rural development, helping people start businesses. Like, there's so many different ways to serve in the Peace Corps. And so I think the first thing for you to do is just get acquainted, if you haven't yet, with all the different options. And so you can kind of learn about that. They do have a pretty extensive application process, so just be prepared, but our office can absolutely help you. I know there's a personal statement. I believe you have to submit a resume. They're kind of picky, I would say, about what they want their resume to look like. But they do have examples for you, and we can help you craft your resume so that it fits to their requirements. I believe you have to have like letters of recommendation and references, so it's a process to apply, but it's worth it. Again, it's a really great program. So my first piece of advice is go on their website if you haven't already, research, learn about, so you can get clear on, do you want to do environmental education? Like, what is it that you're interested in doing in the Peace Corps? Connect with the recruiter, and I'll drop her information. And I think one reason that I think she spends a lot of time at UIC is that there's so many UIC students and alums have served in the Peace Corps. And so they're really excited about working with UIC just because they have a lot of folks who have ended up serving as Peace Corps volunteers. And she also served somewhere in Eastern Europe, I can't remember exactly, but she can also tell you about her experience. And I think that's just a good reminder for anything you're trying to do as far as a gap year experience, that research piece is really important. Once you've defined, a goal, maybe you're gonna have multiple goals, making sure you're doing research about like, what are those options? Can you talk to somebody, for example, like the Peace Corps, and you talk to somebody who served in the Peace Corps, can you ask them questions about their experiences? You don't wanna sign up for something and not really know what you're getting yourself into. So researching online, talking to people is really important to help you make an informed decision versus just kind of like signing up right away. So those are just some tips for the Peace Corps. I know you also have to do, if you get kind of accepted, you have to do like a physical, like exam, just to make sure that you're okay to be in another country for 2 years without access to a lot of medical care. I believe there's also like a mental health exam. So they're pretty thorough. They want to make sure that you're a good fit for the program and that they can support you in your service. And I will drop Jill's information in that chat.
Awesome. Good to know. So, and to all of our participants, thank you again for joining us in this conversation. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and add it into the group chat portion. But while we're talking about Peace Corps, and one of the things that Missy had mentioned is to connect with someone who actually completed or participated in Peace Corps. One of the things I would recommend for anybody is to try to connect with anyone who is in the, or have the career path or that's similar to what you're trying to pursue. So for example, for me, for anything that I wanted to look into in terms of a next step or next move or next chapter in my career, I try to connect with people who are already in that line or area of work and or have that experience. So even for my graduate program, I wanted to talk to someone who is in the program. So I wanted to get as much information from them and say, what's the experience? What is it like doing this? And what is it like? What's the environment like? And they can give you all that information. And I usually tell people, when you go to those open houses, you get the ideal student. They're the number one or their top students, and they'll sit there and it's like, oh, this is great, this is awesome, and everything is wonderful. And it's like, yeah, that student is great. I want to talk to that student standing in the corner. You know, I want to get as much of a perspective as possible for me, the type of people that I come across, to make sure this is going to be a good fit. So I just want to emphasize that that piece that you shared just a moment ago.
Mm-hmm. And so speaking of that, I think another really good tip if you're thinking about graduate school, I know we're getting off topic a little bit, but this is still, I think, a good topic, is see if you can sit in on a class, even if you have to do it virtually, like right now. I feel like it's one thing to hear about how awesome these graduate school classes are, different programs. It's another thing to sit in on that class either in person or virtually and just get a sense of like, how are these classes run? What are the other students like? What's the conversation like? I just kind of feel like that's just not something that people think about, but you absolutely can sit in on graduate classes, just get a sense of what those programs are like. So don't be afraid to ask if you can sit in. And like Tian said, the students that they have on the panels when you go to the open houses, those are the rock stars, and the rock stars are great. But you want to talk to some of the other students too and ask them if they're satisfied with the program. Are they happy that they started the program? For sure. So don't be afraid to ask questions and be that person, because you want to make sure that whatever you're signing up for is a good fit for you and you really thoroughly vetted that for sure.
Absolutely. We have another question, and it's coming from Paul, and it said, do you recommend shadowing other professionals related to your career path? Saying his goal is physical therapy, but considering shadowing chiropractors, athletic trainers, doctors of osteopathic medicine as well. And I would say absolutely yes. The shadowing is a great option. I would encourage anyone in those particular areas specifically is to get some shadowing in as much as possible. But for all students, all majors, all fields, shadowing is a great opportunity. So I would recommend that without a doubt.
Let's see. Okay. And then there also was a question about advice during a gap year, like if you're maybe going to take a gap year during college, and then also kind of asking a little bit about COVID-19. I think this is a great question, very timely for what's going on. I think in some ways, I think the advice isn't that different. To try to think about like, what are your goals for that experience? If you're going to take a semester off or you're going to take a year off, like what are you trying to get out of that? Again, are you trying to make money? Are you trying to get career experience? Do you want to do some volunteer work? I did some researching earlier in the week just to kind of see what was going on with different AmeriCorps programs. And it looks like all the programs that I researched and reached out to, it looks like they're all recruiting for, like, a lot of times, not always, but a lot of AmeriCorps programs will start like in the late summer or early fall. And it looks like they're all recruiting. So it looks like most of these programs are going to be happening. Some of them may be happening remotely or virtually, right? Depending on what's going on in our world, you know, in July, August, et cetera. Like I know, for example, like City Year, which works with elementary school and high school students all over the country and also in Chicago, it looks like they're working with their students remotely right now, kind of probably how like we're doing right now. And so I would definitely check in with what you're thinking about and just try to see, do they have a plan for remote work? If we need something like that in the fall, you want to make sure that whatever you're thinking about maybe has plans for that, in case that we can't always be in person. But define your goals, do some research, and also just reach out to different programs or different opportunities to see what their plans are going forward so you can make a good decision. But it's okay to take, you know, a gap year during college as long as you try to figure out what you're trying to get out of it versus just taking a gap because you're not sure what else to do. Anything else to add, Tian?
Yeah, I would, you know, I totally agree with what you're saying, and I would really encourage the student who asked the question to just think about what is the outcome, what's the end goal for taking the gap year. Because taking a gap year in the middle of your pursuit of your undergraduate degree is different from taking a gap year after you've completed the degree. And you have to take into consideration, how does that look in terms of your classes when you start back? Because there are some classes that's only offered a certain time of the school year. So if you take that gap year and it's like, okay, I'll come back in the fall, but the classes you could have been taking in the spring may not be offered in the fall. So you want to make sure you are really planning this out thoroughly if you're taking that gap year. If anything, sometimes it may be better for you to just take a semester out in terms of a full year during your undergrad. That could probably work for you. But I would recommend that you have that conversation with your academic advisor to see how that will how that will work out if you take the break during the pursuit of your undergraduate degree.
Thank you, Tan. I think that was really good advice.
All right, so we do have another question. Say, I plan on going into occupational therapy. Do you know of any programs that pays for grad school tuition in exchange for volunteer work? And for me, I don't have one that comes to mind right now. But Missy, do you have any that comes to mind right now off the top of your head? Because I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I don't. I think that, like, I know there's an AmeriCorps program called the National Health Corps that actually has a branch in Chicago. They have branches, I want to say, in like Philadelphia. There's a San Francisco. There's a few different like kind of bases across the country. And I know they do a lot of like public health related work. So it's not necessarily occupational therapy exactly, but it's definitely an opportunity to work with families and individuals. And if you do that program, you get an educational award. It's about $6,000 that you could use to help pay for some of graduate school. I think the other option would be, it's a little different from what you're asking, but like when you get into graduate school, sometimes you can find like a graduate assistantship or a research assistantship that sometimes would come with a tuition waiver, which means you have to pay the other fees, but you don't always have to pay tuition. I think what's complicated, at least from my understanding about like occupational therapy and physical therapy, is that those graduate programs are really demanding because you're doing clinicals, you're doing a lot of work. So it could be hard to squeeze in like an assistantship, like a research assistantship or a graduate assistantship, if you also have to do all your clinicals. But that's a really good question for you to ask admissions counselors for any of the graduate programs that you're thinking about. Like, do they offer assistantships? Do they offer tuition waivers? And just see what they say. But I think one option would be to do an AmeriCorps program for a year or two, because you would get that. If you do a full-time program, you would get a $6,000 education award that, you know, obviously is not going to pay for all of grad school, but it does help. And there are some programs, if you can Google this, there are some AmeriCorps or some graduate programs that do like match the education award, or will give you like a scholarship on top of that. I also would ask about if they offer fee waivers. Like I know for law schools, they offer fee waivers. If you're an AmeriCorps alum, you don't have to pay any of the application fees to apply to law school, which is, to be honest, super expensive. So you could ask if they offer like a fee waiver if you're applying to graduate school as an AmeriCorps alum. It's a great question. Thank you for asking.
Yes, and you know, I would also to add on to that, you know, it would be key. They're usually for graduate programs, they usually provide a list of different types of like fellowships and research opportunities and scholarships and grants. So I would usually recommend students that for the program that you're looking to go into, check and see if they have any of those type of opportunities. And then there are some state grants, as well as some national type of grants to competitions. So for example, if you are in the state of Illinois, they have a grant where you get about $10,000 or $12,000, but in exchange for that, you would have to work for a year after graduating in the state of Illinois. So grants like that are still available that you can try to look into, but check with the academic department program that you're looking to go to be admitted to, and see if they can have that information to share with you, because there are a lot of department grants as well.
Mm-hmm. And Tam, that one that you're talking about, I think it's called like the Diversifying like Faculty in Illinois program. Is
Yeah,
that what you're talking about?
yeah, that was the one that came to mind. But
Okay.
there are other ones similar to that as well that they can look into. But it really depends on what program they're going into and the availability for that. But yes, DFI is the one. I agree.
Okay, just wanted to check. That's what you're talking about. Looks like we have another question about gap years for graduate students, and if it's like the same or different for undergrad. And I think it kind of goes back to what Tam was just saying of when somebody asked about taking that gap year in the middle of college, is just, you know, are you trying to take it in the middle of graduate school? The things she talked about are really important. Are there certain classes that are only offered particular semesters? And then also, like, what are your goals for that gap year? And, you know, are you trying to get more career experience, or if you're trying to do it after graduate school, you know, that's an option too. I think it depends on what you're trying to get out of it. And I think Tan's point about connecting with professionals who are doing what you want to do is so important, because they can offer you advice about how they navigated that experience. And they also sometimes can help you connect with other people in your profession so that you can build a stronger network. I think sometimes when we do networking, we feel like we're just trying to get a job. And sometimes that's true, but I feel like the networking for information is really, really important. And I think sometimes college students feel like they don't have anything to offer if they're networking with professionals, but you never know. Their kid could be trying to go to UIC and they want to interview you about UIC. You might be from a neighborhood they want to know more about. So don't just think that you're sort of doing all the taking. You can also be sharing information that could help the professional that you're networking with too. It's not just about you not taking from them. You could actually be really helpful for that professional as well.
I agree. And let me add on another piece in how taking a gap year while pursuing your degree for graduate school could be slightly different. Is there are many graduate programs that are on a cohort setup. And if you take a break, a gap year, that kind of takes you out of that cohort. So you really would have to take into consideration how that would affect you. And that, again, that depends on the program that you're in. So for that, I would really recommend, similar to the undergrad, talk to the academic advisor. Talk to the academic advisor for your grad program to see if that gap time period is doable for you in terms of your goals and when you see yourself. Because even if you do plan to take that gap year, you're no longer, if you're a full-time student, that 2-year completion is going to now be extended to 3 years. And you know, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you know, that's something you have to figure out how that's going to work in terms of your goals long term. So yeah, the gap year is a slightly different situation for graduate school.
And then someone asked a question about what is a cohort. So it depends on the graduate program. I would say a cohort, sometimes it's like a smaller group of people, like in a program. Like I know some graduate programs, it's a cohort model. So you start year one and you're with the same people, generally in the same courses through the whole program.
The whole program.
You get to know those people real well. You love them, hate them, you spend a lot of time with them. And so your classes are like stacked and designed to be taken like semester after semester with the same people. So I think what Tana's saying is that if you decide to take a year off from graduate school, you might be sort of like leaving your cohort, and also the classes are sort of designed to build upon each other. So it could lengthen potentially like your experience in graduate school. And I think her point is checking in with your academic advisor, especially if you're thinking about taking a year off from undergrad or grad school, and how does that impact like the time to graduation. It might not impact it very much, but it could have a major impact. It just depends on your program.
I agree. I totally agree. And not every program, and we all know not every program is cohort, but there are a lot of cohort programs at graduate school level. So that's what I'm saying. It's chances are you could be in a cohort program for your master's or PhD program. It really depends. We do have another question that says, how do you advise approaching job shadow or internship opportunities at organizations that have recently cut said program due to uncertainty around COVID-19? And my advice to you is to, you know, this is temporary. What we would hope, we're hoping that this is a temporary situation. So if anything, I would say is to just, as Missy, as you mentioned before, is to just take advantage of the networking opportunities. And so that way the people that you're trying to connect with can keep you in mind when those opportunities open back up, if they are being closed right now as a result of the current pandemic. And, try and see other options. Maybe there's, things may not be going well in one industry. Check to see if there's an opportunity in another industry that's kind of similar. Sometimes we have to go and change our path in terms of pursuing opportunities to see if there's something in another area. So that would be my advice: is patience and find another route, and then take advantage of the opportunities to network at this time until things improve, and continue moving forward. Because I don't encourage people to just sit still and wait it out. I would encourage you to stay active while you during this time, and find other ways to connect with people as you move forward.
And I think that it's weird, but because not everyone, but a lot of people are working from home, some people strangely may have more time on their hands to connect with you over the phone or via like something like this, kind of like a video conversation. And so it's okay now to reach out to professionals who you want to learn more about their career path and what they do. It's okay to do that now. They may actually have more time to chat with you now than they would if they were actually in their offices.
And maybe more willing to, now that they have extra time on their hands. I'm like, sure, you want to talk for 30 minutes? Yes.
Right.
And
I think,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just about to add to the piece that, what some people enjoy doing is talking about themselves. So I'm sure there will be some people who are willing to share their experiences with you at this point in time with, to help keep them busy and keep them active. And for many people, like for us, Missy, if I'm okay speaking on your behalf, it's okay if we enjoy paying it forward.
Yeah.
So to share our experiences with people who are interested in pursuing the career paths that we are currently in, for us, there's a sense of fulfillment, and there are other people in other areas and fields who are open to paying it forward and offering advice and having conversations with you.
Absolutely, because people have helped us as we were exploring our career paths, and so we want to help other people. And I think the other thing is that in interviews, eventually for grad school or jobs, like employers might ask you a little bit about like kind of what you did during this time. So obviously you're probably taking your classes, but you can talk about, I was taking my classes. I also reached out to some professionals to learn more about what they were doing and how I could get involved. Like that's going to really make you stand out from all the other individuals who maybe weren't that proactive. So you would have a great story to share in an interview about what you were doing to explore your profession and get more connected as well.
Absolutely. And I'm looking at the time, and we only have 1 minute left in this lovely live chat that we had. And let me take this opportunity to thank all the participants and all the amazing questions. These were amazing questions that we were able to answer. We hope we answered. We tried. Good faith effort. And please be sure to connect with us at Career Services. If you want to send us an email, it's careerservices@uic.edu or careerservices.uic.edu for our website for upcoming chats. And feel free to connect with us if you want to talk to us, meaning me or Missy, in more detail. We're happy to schedule appointments. So with any of our career advisors in the Career Services office, just keep in mind we are here to support you in your career development journey. So Missy, is there any final comments you would like to add?
I think the only thing I would say is that we did upload a recorded video about gap year experiences, how to plan a gap year. It talks about AmeriCorps, it talks about teaching abroad, it talks about fellowships. So if you haven't had a chance to check it out, it's on the Career Services website. On the front page, there's a CareerIgnite section, and it's uploaded in that section. So check it out, and we are happy to help you achieve your career goals, whatever they are.
Absolutely. Plan and action with a plan.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us, and just keep in contact with us if you have questions or anything else we can do to help.
Take care and have a great day.
Thank you.